Welcome to Could Be Pretty Cool News, the podcast where we dive into the exciting world of creative entrepreneurship. I'm your host, Casey, and together we'll embark on a journey to explore this dynamic ecosystem from multiple angles, including academia, research and data, community building, and compelling personal narratives from creative entrepreneurs themselves. Get ready to be inspired, informed, and empowered as we uncover the stories and strategies behind building successful creative ventures. It's time to discover why the world of creative entrepreneurship could be pretty cool. Greetings, thrill seekers. Welcome to a bone-chillingly special edition of Could Be Pretty Cool News. Tonight, we're creeping into the shadows of the haunted attraction industry with a true master of macabre entertainment. Prepare to be spooked as we welcome Ben Armstrong, co-creator of Netherworld Haunted House. Since 1997, Netherworld has been turning Atlanta's nights into nightmares, and we mean that in the best possible way. For over 25 years, Armstrong and his partner Billy Messina have been conjuring up cutting-edge scares with Hollywood-grade special effects, award-winning makeup, and more creepy creatures than you can shake a skeleton arm at. Netherworld isn't just a haunted house, it's a terrifying tour de force that's caught the eye of everyone from CNN to, the Oprah magazine. And since moving to Stone Mountain in 2017, they've expanded their realm of terror to include year-round escape games and a monster museum. So, dim the lights, check under your bed, and join us for a fascinating conversation. If you dare. So, we are so excited to welcome you to this spooky edition of Could Be Pretty Cool News. And to start off with, if you could just introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about what it is that you do.
Sure. My name is Ben Armstrong. I'm the co-owner of Netherworld Haunted House. And this is our 28th year of operation, if you can believe that. I've done a lot of things. I worked in television for 18 years. I was actually a late night horror show host, but I started Netherworld with my business partner, Billy Messina, and some other folks 28 years ago, and got into doing haunted houses professionally. I did it for a couple years before that, and it is a monster. Let me tell you, it's a huge event. Tons of people come. We have tons of people work there. We're known nationally and internationally. It's a lot.
I love that. It was a monster. And so I would love, if you will, to go back to the beginning. 28 years is a long time to be in business doing anything, but to have one of the largest, most successful haunted houses in the country. Where does that seed even get planted? Can you remember what was the conversation that sparked, you know what, we're going to start a haunted house?
Well, it's interesting when you're a kid and when you're a teenager, when you start to go to college, people are always like, what are you going to do? And a lot of people know, I'm going to do this. I'm going to be a dentist. I'm going to be a chiropractor. I'm like, I don't know what I want to do. So I always said, I want to make bad monster movies. That's my pat answer. So I got a communications degree and I ended up in television. But even as a kid, when I was younger, even in elementary school, the family did the school carnival, did the haunted house, and I always enjoyed it. And I always enjoyed monsters. I love monsters, everything about them. I don't like slashers. I don't like killers. I like monsters, really cool creatures. Sometimes they do have to eat people, so there can be blood. But in general, I don't like human on human. That's not a thing. But I always liked that. And so where I really got into it was when I was in television. I was working with the Muscular Dystrophy Association. I was producing the local telethon. And as a fundraiser, I'm like, hey, let's do a haunted house. And I was a late night horror show host. So I had a venue, like we'll do it with my TV program that I do. And so I did that for 3 years in Tallahassee, Florida, and really got bitten by the bug. And of course, in television, you jump markets. So I moved to Atlanta. I came here And I was like, oh, I need to find a haunted house to work at. And I found this big one called Silo X. And I walked in the door, and next thing I knew, I was in charge of a lot of it. And I worked for that owner for a couple of years, and I kind of learned the ropes because these guys were business guys and they really knew how to actually run it as a business. Most haunts before that, they were charity driven, shoestring type operations, and learned how to do it. And then one year they didn't open, and I'm like, eh. I got together with some people, and we said, when our other haunt didn't open, we said, we can do one. So we went through all the process, and of course, it's a business. And we were very artistically driven. We had ideas about what a haunted house should be. At the time, haunted houses were all sort of disconnected elements. There's a Freddy room, there's a Jason room. And my background was in, like, I used to do Dungeons and Dragons and things like that. So I was like, no, we need to create our own theme. We need to create something that no one has ever seen before. So, and something with a connected, like the entire place is part of a story. So spent a lot of time trying to figure out what was the story, because it had to be something that was specific, but yet had the ability to evolve over time. So I remember putting like hundreds of words on a paper, and finally came up with one of the best ones was Netherworld. I'm like, well, it's about Netherworld, which is where monsters dwell, a land of yawning graves, the world of the dead. And so the concept is the Netherworld breaks loose into our world and causes mayhem. And we started with an initial story, but every year we're able to kind of change the theme, but it's always a continuing story. It's like a TV series or like a series of movies. And we've always created original characters. And at the time, like I said, that was not how it was done. Now it's more common with haunted attractions everywhere. There's an entire industry out there. And we were talking before we began the podcast about how do you learn about it. And that's actually something I'm heavily involved in. We have a huge trade show. There's lots of seminars. For 10 years, I did the seminars. I designed them. And then when we moved, I think it's about 7 to 8 years ago, we purchased a building. And for many years, we leased a location. And that was a huge move. So I told the people at the trade show, I'm like, I can't do these seminars anymore, but I will present and I will assist. So, but a number of folks were there to try to provide education, best practices, to make sure people get started, do the right things, all that kind of stuff. And just help them out with being in the industry.
So I'm curious, like for me, the only thing that I can think of that's almost like akin to this would be like a theatrical company, right? Like you start off producing shows, maybe you're
Right.
renting spaces, and then eventually you build your audience and then you purchase a building that's yours. I'm curious, how does that work for a seasonal attraction? Or do you all have programming throughout the year? How does owning a building work now?
So when we first started, the first year, we rented a space for like 3 months, and it was the old Kinder's Furniture Outlet. It's now part of Kennesaw State University. It's up north that way. And so we moved in, we built it, and we packed it up. And it's sort of like when the smoke cleared, we'd actually made a little bit of money. We didn't actually go under. It was a success, but maybe we made half a penny an hour for our year-long work. So then we had to do this again, and we went into another location, which became our permanent home for many years. But then we moved in and we moved out. And the third time we did it, which would be year 3, we're like, this is crazy, because you never know if you're going to open. And it's really hard to start from scratch every year. And it's particularly now, for haunted attractions, they're at one of the highest levels of fire safety and all these kind of rules, because you have an assembly occupancy. So there's a lot of people in there. Fortunately, haunted houses are generally pretty safe, but we're in the same category with a lot of musical venues, and there have been a lot of things over the years. There was a particular event many years ago at a Six Flags where a haunt burnt down and a couple of people died. So that changed the codes. So it's very difficult to get a location, to move in, to build it in a short time frame, and to tell people that you're there. Very daunting task. But to take a year-round lease is also kind of crazy, because here you're committing to this massive thing over years, and you only get paid once a year, maybe. So that was pretty intense, signing that lease, for sure. But it paid off. And essentially,
Things are different now because we have a lot of other things that we do. But for many years, all we did was a haunted house. I mean, we all still had our day jobs, of course. It was a long time before we were able to walk away from that. But the you're on the hook for all this rent and all this stuff. But we were somehow able to pull it off.
It's a lot of Atlanta history
Oh yeah.
unexpectedly that it seems like you all were a part of. I would love to know, you mentioned year after year, you're expanding upon a story and a narrative and you're creating this experience. When in the year do you all start and come together and say, all right, we need to start planning out what this season's going to look like? When does that process start for you?
We basically never stop. We never stop. So currently, I mean, we have a full time crew that works year round on the venue, and I don't know, it varies. And people always say, "How many people work for you?" I'm like, I wish I knew. There's a bunch of them, but especially this time of year. But there's probably between 10 and 15 people that work essentially year round on the event. So for me, and also we have escape games. So in our current building, we have 5 escape games. So we're also running that business year round as well. But the day that the place closes, I got to have kind of a direction where we're headed. So I'll know because we have to. There's a period where okay, we winterize, we repair the things that are broken. We have a little bit of time. We usually do some behind the scenes shows in December. Occasionally, we used to do Christmas shows, which were a ton of fun. People loved them, but it was just a lot of work to do them for one night and then to take the Christmas away. We may do stuff like that in the future, but right now we're just mainly doing the season. And then, but I have to know what direction I'm headed so that I can start telling the artist, like, hey, this year it's going to be whatever the theme is. And for example, this year, we usually have 2 attractions. So our main attraction this year is called Wake the Dead. And it's basically an undead theme. So we have ghosts, wraiths, specters. We have a ton of vampires, and we have a ton of what we call the restless dead, which is sort of like Army of Darkness type skeletal creatures. And they're emerging from the netherworld and they're coming to feast upon this elemental energy. So the last year was called Primordial, and these elementals were released onto the world. So the dead they hunger for this energy. So they're coming out and they're fighting with these humans that are also trying to get the energy. So it's like a battle between kind of post-apocalyptic humans and this armies of the dead. And our second show is Mr. Grindel's Birthday Party of Horrors. And Mr. Grindel was a character from about 9 or 10 years ago at Netherworld. And maybe it was only 7 years. I forget. It's been a long time. But we don't always do clowns. A lot of places do clowns all the time. But Mr. Grindel is actually Grendel from the Beowulf saga. He's an ancient ogre. And what he did was he survived by disguising himself initially as a jester. The lyre pipe of the jester that hid his horns. So he would travel around with his fellow ogres and trolls and goblins and orcs, and they would set up like a carnival and then they would eat people. So this year was time. It's like time to bring back Mr. Grendel, and I was like, where do you see clowns? The circus and this. I'm like, about a birthday party. So it's Mr. Grendel's birthday. So yeah, it's kind of like that. So at the beginning of the year, back to your original question, I knew I wanted to do Clowns and the birthday party, and I knew I wanted to do, this undead theme. So immediately we pulled out, we took our queue line spaces and we built them into creature shops, and we start taking animatronics and things of that nature and starting to skin them as either types of undead or as clowns. And we start basically building assets, and we actually start on it before we even know exactly where we're going. We literally start because we know the direction we're headed. But if I had to wait to write the exact script, it would be months in. I'd have lost time. So also, the minute the season ends, I got to do the books for like a month and a half. So I'm doing the books, I'm writing the theme, working with the crew. So it just never stops.
Yes, shout out to Miss Davis, my 12th grade English teacher, because I totally remember Beowulf and everything that you just said. Like the creative in me is like, oh my God, that's so excited. But the wimp in me is like, that sounds terrifying. So I'm curious for you, what do you think it is that draws people to this type of experience year after year?
Well, I've spent a lot of time thinking about it. I could, so first of all, I'll tell you what Netherworld does, and I'll tell you what haunted houses do. So what I live kind of by this particular mantra. I have many of them, but give them what they want and give them what you want. So people have an expectation of a haunted house. They want a chainsaw at the end. They want to be shock scared. They want darkness. They want certain things. So I remember in our early years, we're like, oh, we're not doing a chainsaw. That's cliche. We're not going to do that. And of course, people come out like, that was great, but where's the chainsaw? So it's like, give them what they want. But give them what you want means you need to come up with unique, original, different stuff. So you got to do both. If you're serving someone a meal, it's got to be a good meal. But then you provide the sauce, the flavor, the extra bit, the crazy dessert. And that's kind of what Netherworld has always been about. There are many amazing attractions all over the country that are fantastic. But one of the things that we've always specialized in, and I think I wouldn't say we weren't the first, we've always kind of consistently held a standard of doing things that are a little different, a little unique, where you're going to see things in Netherworld you will see nowhere else. Now, why do people go to haunted houses? It's interesting. Written a lot of articles and done a lot of seminars on these kind of topics, but it's interesting. People would say that people want to get scared. People want to get scared in a safe environment. It's like a roller coaster. It's a blood pumping experience, but it's a lot more complex than that. Everyone has their own motivations. Sometimes people go because they want to see the art. Sometimes people want to go because they want to see their friends get scared. Sometimes people want to go to try not to get scared. There's a complex series of things that work, but in reality, people go to haunted houses to create memories with their friends and their family. And the best thing about it is that they gather together, they plan to do this, it builds up, they're getting nervous, like the click, click, click of the roller coaster. They drive there, they get all excited. And then when they leave, they're just talking, well, look what happened. And unlike in a movie, you're watching the screen and everyone sees exactly the same thing. In a haunted house, everyone has a different experience. It's a 360 thing. You're looking this way, that happened, this person scared you, this person scared the other person. They come out, they're like, did you see that? I'm like, I did not see that. I saw this. You saw that? They're like, oh, they're full of excitement. So it's really about bonding and creating memories. And also, it's a tradition. It's become, in the Atlanta area, at least Netherworld has, it's become a Halloween tradition. A lot of people come every single year, and we've been around so long, there's people who went on their first date there, and now they're bringing their teenagers there. So a lot of folks, they really look forward to it every year, just like, oh, every year we go and get a tree at this place, or every year we go to Stone Mountain to see the lights, or whatever it is they do for Christmas. So it's got the tradition element, it's got that other aspect. So there's a lot to it. Also, it's kind of that old, like Joseph Conrad wrote about the hero's journey, going into that dark cave, confronting your fears. There's a lot of people who are deathly afraid of haunted houses, but they want to face their fears, and they go in there for that purpose. So it's really intriguing, the types of people that will go and what they want, but they have different motivations. But ultimately, our goal is to entertain, and ideally we entertain them by scaring their friends, or at least making them laugh. I like people to have nightmares for a week, not for the rest of their lives. So we don't go too over the top, but we try to make it entertaining, and we try to give those shocks. Boom, boom, boom.
So there are 2 points in there that I think are really fascinating. The first, haunted experiences as tradition. We think of the nutcrackers and the Christmas carols, like that is the art you go and experience at Christmas. But to think of haunted attractions as tradition, I think is really fascinating. And then also, there's a lot of talk now about like immersive experiences, right? Like immersive Van Gogh, immersive some Netflix series. And so it's almost like, wait a minute, haunted attractions were like immersive creative experiences before this even became a buzzword. And yeah.
There's haunted houses. The people I know that own attractions have been doing 40 and 50 years. They've been running these attractions. And it really is, it's been something that's been going on for that long. And you follow the history of it. It's also got its origins and the carnival things and the JCs. But there's stuff like this has been going on as far back in history as you can go, this type of a thing. And it is funny, of course, we're all interwoven, our industry is interwoven with all those entertainment industries. For example, like I said, one of the big ones was the escape game industry that popped up, I don't know, that started becoming popular, I want to say, probably more than 10 years ago when it really started coming to the States. And all of my buddies were like, oh, yeah, we're doing escape games. You need to get into it. I'm like, I want to do a haunted house. I don't want to do an escape game. But I started going to them like, these are pretty cool. And then when we moved into this building, which is much bigger, a portion of our building is a huge warehouse. A portion is a ton of office space. So it had a lot of rooms that were perfect to build escape games where you could kind of do multiple rooms. They're already built, and just kind of fill them with theming. So we did that, and I really enjoyed the creation of the escape games because it's a different thing. Very tactile, and it's you and your friends. But ours are a little spooky. They've got creepy bits to them. They can be scary. Some of them are our last one, Alien Terror, is very scary, but way less scary than the haunted house because there's not like actors leaping at it. You'd scare you. But yeah, there's these experiences. I mean, there's a ton of things now out with projections. You'll see things like they did the Jurassic Park dinosaur thing. That was really cool. I really enjoyed the Stranger Things one that I went to. It had some haunted house elements to it, but there was a minute there, I'm like, oh, we went through all these different experiences. Like, we're about to go into a haunted house. And then it was that big screen thing that they had. It was really well done. But I was sure we were going to go to a haunted house for a second. But yeah, there's a lot of them. And we are living right now in the experience economy. A lot of people still want stuff, but there's a lot of people who value things like travel and experiences at a higher level than they do buying a new set of china. They want to do things. And particularly after COVID, people are just like, they were so cooped up, they wanted to get out and do things. So there's a ton of these new things popping up. And of course, even traditional things like going to concerts have become popular again. Another element to things like haunted attractions and immersive experiences that are local is that stuff is expensive, and like traveling to theme parks is becoming cost prohibitive for a lot of people. So you heard the term staycation. It works out, but for the amount of stuff that happens in a haunted house, the amount of time you're in, and generally haunted houses are, for what you see, they're pretty inexpensive. I'll go to like a lot of big concerts and see all the cool stuff, and I'm like, man, we got like 10,000 tons more stuff than even a good concert is. Of course, I don't have the nostalgia of songs that have been around for 30 years, but I guess we have. We're around for 28, so maybe we do have a lot of nostalgia.
You're getting close.
Yeah.
So I have two more questions for you, if that's okay. So the first question is, you mentioned that you have full-time staff members, but also it appears on your website that you hire seasonal team members. So it's looking like designers and box office folks. And so I'm curious, are your seasonal employees, are they typically people who are local to Metro Atlanta? Do people travel to come and be a part of the experience of designing or being an artisan for Netherworld? How does that work?
So, yeah, we have this huge group of people, and we call them the Nether Spawn. That's the name of the people who work at Netherworld. And we tend to hire as many as 500 people a season. It's not always that high. It might range in between 400 and 500. And over half, the bulk of them are haunted house actors. So they're going to be the performers in the attraction. And so we go through quite a process. They submit stuff online. We schedule for interviews. I'll interview them with our casting director. And we actually interview them. It's not like, oh, bark like a dog, crawl around like a spider monkey. It's really interesting because over the years, you learn often the people who are the most flashy can't necessarily maintain it. And the quiet people, you get them into a mask and they really start to blossom. But yeah, so we hire a ton of people. And of course, we have a ton that we retain. Generally, the metrics change from year to year. We retain about 2/3. So every year. So we hire about 1/3. So we're hiring 150, sometimes maybe 200 people, something like that are new every year. But as our event has grown, we have a ton of people in what we call front of house. And front of house includes ticket sales, gift shops, food, photos, parking, operations. I mean, there's so many different departments. And those folks are sort of the backbone of how the whole place runs. So very critical to it, because you go through the main attraction of Netherworld. Of course, you've parked and you've gone through all the things in the queue lines and all this. You go through the main attraction. It takes about 30 minutes or so to go through the first one. It seems like they're both gotten longer this year, so it's going to be even longer. But then you go on into a midway. This midway is Halloween. It's giant pumpkins. It's probably 5 different places you can get food. There's photo ops. There's roaming monsters. There's games. So you go through that midway, then you go to the second attraction, which is a little bit smaller. It might take 15, 20 minutes to go through. And then you go back into the midway and you can go by the gift shop. So yeah, it's a lot of people. And we take all types. I mean, some people come with experience. That's one of my favorite things. And it's funny. I know this is going to air later, but when we're doing this interview, tomorrow, my staff has been interviewing return hires for a number of weeks. Like, I'm coming back this year. What's your schedule? All this stuff. But we're about to start tomorrow night interviewing new people. So that's always fun to sit there and they're in front of you and you're kind of like, so what brought you here? What do you do? And you're like, you go, you talk to them and you kind of learn, I like doing haunted house when I was a kid. Or some people like, I just love Halloween. Some people like, I'm an actor. I want to act and play characters. It's a huge variety. And you're trying to get at some people. I do live action role playing, or I like Rocky Horror Picture Shows. The amount of people that are adjacent in different realms to the haunted house is something. But the thing that draws them together is that sense of community. And it's so fun when they arrive and all the things we do before the show starts, when the show ends, and just the experience of it. If you have an interest in working at a haunted house, wherever you are, wherever you hear this podcast, it's probably one of the hardest jobs you'll ever have. It's hot, it's intense, but it is so fun and it is so full of memories. When you put on these horrific costumes and you're waiting in the dark, and then you leap out and you scare a grown man and he falls on the ground, you're like, wow, that was cool. And then you're just in the environment. Like Netherworld it's continuous, and there's like giant mansions or cemeteries or bizarre laboratories or ice caves with woolly mammoths. It's just, there's one thing after the other. It's like a never ending thing. And when people get out, they're like, whoo, man, I'm done. I'm exhausted. So to be a part of that, though, and to work with these people and to be transformed by our makeup artists and by our costume staff, and it's an experience. So hiring those seasonal people, meeting for the first time, is exciting, and seeing the people who come back every year. We have patches. We get these jackets, and people get patches. And so if you've worked there for 5 years, you're an elder. You worked there 10 years, you're an ancient. You worked there 15 years, you're a primordial. We had to add more last year. We added 20 years, you're a megalodon. And what was the final one? You're a trilobite. If you're there 20 years, 25 years, I should say. So we got people who worked there for 25 years. So, and we have these big, at the end, we do our big wrap party, and we're giving them out like, oh, you made 5 years, you made 10 years, you made 20 years, here's your patch. So that's like a fun thing we do. And also, everyone, if you work there a certain amount of nights, you get different patches, like patches for acting, patches for stunts, patches for front of house, or all the different things, and they're all these cool patches. But that's just one part of the culture. Haunted houses are like a big family, and you're there because you want to be, because it's fun, and because you're drawn to it. A lot of people like spooky stuff. People love it, and it's a chance to really meet like-minded people and hang out with them.
Wow, Netherworld flair. Who knew?
Oh my God, you see our gift shop. Unbelievable. There's so much cool stuff there. It's nuts.
Amazing. Well, my final question for you, as we've been talking about 28 years of being one of the leading haunted houses in the country and the world, I'm wondering if you are someone who is into milestone anniversaries. And so as you're approaching 30, I mean, I don't know if it's a secret, but are there any like plans for the 30th? Have you thought that far ahead?
Of course. Always. You're always trying to keep a couple steps ahead. Sometimes what you're going to do in the next year, a lot of times I won't intentionally won't think about it because you're in it. Like we've been in this one for months and we're trying to land the plane. This is the intense last couple of weeks and like everything is coming together and it's like it's long nights. It's super intense to get it up. So if you like start, oh, let me think about next year, then all of a sudden you're like, I got to focus. But I don't know. I think with the 30th coming, we've had that on our minds. Like, what are we going to do? And when you hit milestones, sometimes it's time to take on a new chapter in the story or just a big change in how things are going to be. So we definitely have plans for it. And we always do special merch or special events or callbacks to old characters and old events because people do follow it. They follow the lore. People come to me all the time. And in 2003, this guy did this thing. I'm like, I can't even remember what happened last year, to be frank. Let me think about that a minute. I'll dredge it up. I think I have a phonographic memory. It's like a record. It just skips and jumps every so often, but it plays funny music. But yeah, we got big plans. But the thing is, too, you try to, in a way, you go, oh, I'm going to hold back for that. In a way, you never want to hold back. It's like, whatever we got, whatever we can make, whatever we can buy, we're going to just blow it out every year. And then when the dust settles, we're going to start charging again. And I think in a business, it's funny, like you do hundreds of things, and I'm convinced like 6 matter, but which 6? I don't know. I'm not stopping any of them. So it makes it very expensive and very time consuming. But the net result is that people are happy and people come back and they have a great time. And what more can you ask for?
Fantastic. I mean, in some way, I think we've touched upon everything that I kind of wanted to cover. Is there anything that I didn't ask you that you wish that I would have asked you?
What I would say, I guess, in closing is that obviously I would recommend people go and check out their local haunted house. It's a fun thing to do. Every haunted house is a little different. So sometimes the small ones, you get that personal touch that can be amazing. The big ones have just over the top, huge stuff in them. But it's a lot of fun to go. It's definitely a fun thing for your family. So if you go to haunted houses, have a great Halloween season, go enjoy them, go to horror nights, do all the things you do. If you haven't, think about it. It's actually pretty fun. I mean, some people, it's a little much. Some people cannot, they get too scared. So obviously, if it's not for you, maybe don't do it. But there are people that go and their friends and family go in and they'll go to the Midway and just hang out and have some fun snacks and watch the monster scare people. And because it's got that element of Halloween. That's another thing. I kind of believe that to be truly successful is another thing I think I call the razor's edge. I think a haunted house needs to run this line between horror and Halloween. And if you go too far into horror, maybe it's a little too bloody, maybe a little too intense. You lose some of the audience. You go too far into Halloween, it might be a little too kiddie, but you have the right amount of horror in Halloween. It's like a sweet spot, and people really love it. So, but yeah, go check out your local haunted house and have a great Halloween season. There you go.
And that brings us to the end of today's episode. Until next time, we encourage you to continue nurturing your process. Farewell, and may all of your creative endeavors flourish. Could Be Pretty Cool News is a Could Be Pretty Cool original production that was workshopped as a part of the 2023 Google News Initiative Pre-Launch Lab. This episode was edited by Trinity Jackson. Our executive producer and host is Casey Willis, and our production coordinator is Liz Moore. The original theme music was composed by Camille Stennis, and our cover art was designed by Aaliyah Johnson. Special thanks to our guests. To find out more about them, you can visit our newsletter at couldbeprettycoolnews.substack.com. Thank you for listening.